But
That's what I would encourage.
the blacks um, don't know how to build things. They only know how to destroy, and not all, but most. And you mentioned that black town down there in Georgia where they're trying to build. They've been working on that town for a long time, and it's not it's not happening. But in your town, the white town is just being built and it's happening fast. What's wrong with the blacks that they tend to only know how to destroy and not build?
It's something they never really learned in their civilizational history.
Uh, Eric, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jesse.
I appreciate
Thanks
you.
for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So, Eric, I want to ask you about this land, of course. Did, was it your idea to build a community for whites only? Was it your idea or a group of people?
There were a group of us. I've been promoting the idea of intentional community for a long time. Many of us are concerned about the future of the demographics in this country. We're afraid that our grandkids and great grandkids just won't have the opportunity to have communities where people look like them, where they accept them for who they are. I experienced some discrimination as a white man growing up in Southern California, where I was a minority. And I, want to protect my kids from the same kind of situation. So, of course, a lot of people feel this way today. There's a lot of anti-white hatred out there. And, several of the people in the community have had negative experiences, not with all people of other races, but there are people out there who are hostile to whites. So, yeah, it's about protecting us and our own.
And and so the people who live there, uh, did they buy their own land or did you buy the land and are you leasing it out to them?
No, we all own it together. So we
Oh,
formed a corporation. The corporation owns the 160 acres,
oh,
and then
okay.
we own shares in the corporation.
That's amazing. And so when you say you were discriminated against while living in Los Angeles, what happened to you? In what way were you discriminated against?
Well, some very limited instances of violence. I mean, I know people who have experienced far worse than I did. Mostly just kind of bullying, having my identity group demeaned, belittled, the accomplishments of my ancestors kind of glossed over in favor of alternative narratives of history, which I don't think are truthful. I think European civilization contributed an awful lot to the world, and I just didn't hear that celebrated. Instead, it was denigrated and sort of cast as the villain of history. And then I recognized that the Mexicans in my town had a fondness for each other. They had loyalty to each other, and they would group up and do things together, and I would be excluded. And I don't blame them for that, but it is just a fact that other groups, they have some sense of a common identity, and I wasn't part of that identity.
Amazing. And how about those people that who are half white? They're white, but they're mixed with something else. Can they get in?
Well, it is a case by case thing. I mean, there's no hard limit on what constitutes someone of European ancestry. Half and half is sort of tricky because half of their identity is non European. They're
Right.
almost as much, non European as they are Europeans. So it depends on where their loyalty lies, what tradition they want to forward, what they see themselves as part of. But our board of managers votes on those admissions decisions. And it's really just we have to look at the totality of factors. What skills do they bring to the table? What resources do we get along with them? Are the other members in the association comfortable with them being there? And I would say typically someone who's half white probably wouldn't get in. But we've had cases where someone was, a 16th, 1/8, something besides European.
And so a guy like the fallen Messiah, Barack Obama, he could not get in, right? Even though his mother was white.
Well, for many reasons, we would not accept Barack Obama.
And once this town is completed, or maybe it's already happened, who going to be the mayor? Who will there be like a mayor and a police department? Who will be like the president in this town? I mean, who
Uh,
will be the leader?
I'm the president of the association, but I'm not the president of the company that owns this land.
Right.
So that's another of our co-founders who leads all of that stuff, and I think he's doing a great job. So presumably Scott would be our de facto mayor, but we're not exactly a town. We're not going to have a post office or police department. We won't even have, public-facing businesses because it is illegal if you have a business with a storefront to turn people away based on race or any other criteria like that. So it's just a neighborhood, really. I mean, we'd like to scale up if possible, but it's easier to get in trouble when you get into all that.
What is your ancestry?
I'm Norwegian, English, and German.
Really? Um, this is so interesting to me. Um, how have you dealt and how are you dealing with the backlash about starting this town? How's that going for you?
Well, it kind of looks worse than it is. Obviously, a lot of people are upset, but when you look at the big videos that are out there, like the Sky News piece, and start scrolling through the comments, the majority of people are either neutral and they don't care what we're doing, or they're positive. Yeah, there is a vocal minority that thinks we should not be allowed to do this, but in general, it's just brought us a lot of support. We've gotten hate online, but that doesn't really mean much. They're not showing up at the gates. They're not, so far, they're not actually bringing us to court. The Attorney General of Arkansas, Tim Griffin, Sky News approached him when they did their piece more than a month ago, just kind of informing him of what we were doing. And he said, racial discrimination has no place in a free society. This raises all sorts of legal and constitutional issues. Our office is looking into the matter. That's what he said more than a month ago. Recently, though, another news agency followed up with his office, and a representative said, according to our preliminary investigations, there's nothing illegal in what they're doing. So
Yeah,
that's very positive.
that's good. It should be just fine that you guys decided, you know what, we want our own place. We want to build our own town, do our own thing. We're going to buy our own land, and we're just going to do what we want to do. That makes sense to me. It should not be illegal to do that at all.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem with other groups doing it
Yeah.
if they want to. There was that Black intentional community in Georgia that was formed a few years ago, and the media was very positive about it as well. I think in some ways, when we had separate communities, the Black community in America and the white community in America, we had fewer problems and more Black people had jobs. There were more two-parent households in the Black community. I'm not saying segregation did that per se, but maybe there's something to having responsibility for your own community and having a sense of community. When everyone's all mixed together, sometimes you don't know what you belong to, and it's hard to keep track of what your values even are.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that there's only 40 people in your town so far, right?
Yeah, around 40.
And I'm surprised that anyone would even pay attention to there only being 40 people there. And it reminded me of the uproar that happened in South Africa. I think they had like they brought like 60 people here, white people from South Africa, and some of the people were complaining about that. I'm like, they don't complain when all these other refugees come in, Mexicans and blacks and everything, but they brought 60 white refugees in, and people got upset. I couldn't understand that.
Yeah, it's clearly a double standard. There are dozens of Jewish intentional communities in this country and around the world, and no one takes issue with that. There are Native American reservations. If it was good to give the Native Americans their own space to have their own communities and preserve their own ways, why is it bad when we want to do exactly the same thing?
Right.
It's a clear double standard.
It is. It looked like, to me at least, that people do better when they live separate from each other, meaning like you just had the blacks over here, the whites over here, the Jews over here, the Mexicans over there. They seem to do better, but when they mix them together in the same neighborhoods, the same schools, and things like that, it creates a big problem. Do you think it's a good idea to separate the people or integrate the people?
Well, in either case, it shouldn't be forced. If people want to integrate voluntarily, I'm not going to stop them. I'm not going to lobby to get the government to prevent mixed neighborhoods from existing. And the fact is, most people, when it's a voluntary situation, they naturally segregate. In the
Yeah,
churches, no one forces you to go to a particular church, but there are obviously black churches and white churches and Mexican churches and Korean churches. It's highly segregated,
yeah.
you know? So I think people should be allowed to do what they want. And when they're allowed to associate freely, they're going to tend to group up with people that are like them, that they can easily understand, where communication is easy and trust is easy.
There is no proof at all that I see that white people are holding the blacks back. There's no proof that they are victims to the white people, that somehow or another the white people are against them. Why do they believe that when there's no proof of that?
Because that's what they're told. That's the narrative.
I
And it's
know, but look
something
like they should
that's
be able to see it. I mean, we look around, you see it's not true. Why can't they see that white people are not holding them back at all?
Well, I mean, if you're taught something from a very early age, it's hard to give it up. It's like you're taught about Santa Claus when you're, 3 or 4 years old, and people typically believe that until they're, 9 or 10 in many
I
cases.
still
Uh,
believe that.
you still believe in Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Oh, well, see, that's what I'm getting at here. No, just like Santa Claus is this myth. No offense, Jesse. I know you believe in Santa Claus, but
Santa Claus still exists, Bernie.
um, no, I mean, they're taught these things from a very early age. It's part of our education system, critical race theory. And many people throughout their entire education, all the way up to college, that's what they're taught. And some people study these things. Like that's their major is Black studies or racial relations kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
and so there's this class of intellectuals who've been indoctrinated with this ideology, and it's really, really well thought through. It's not empirically supported, but it's a complex story that's compelling to many people. But I don't think, how do we get people out of this way of thinking? I don't think it's as compelling as the idea of, self ownership and responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think having more communities of Black people for Black people that are thriving, that'll lead them to, in America, seek their own path rather than thinking they have to seek redress from this oppressor group. Instead, say, like, hey, America has still abundant, cheap land. We still have relatively good jobs, good incomes. We have a lot of opportunity. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And Black Americans should feel the same way. It's like, all right, maybe you're not at the top of the social pyramid just yet. That's the Jews, and now the Indians are taking over. But still, we have plenty of opportunities. Like I'm a person of ordinary means, and most of the people here, we're like middle class white people. We're not wealthy white people, but we could build our own community. And there are a lot of Black folks in the US in a similar position, and they have the same opportunities we have. They could have their own spaces, and then there'd be no reason to blame anyone else. So I think entrepreneurship, self-ownership, responsibility, that's what's rewarding, and that's what's inspiring to people. So we just need to see those examples.
But
That's what I would encourage.
the blacks um, don't know how to build things. They only know how to destroy, and not all, but most. And you mentioned that black town down there in Georgia where they're trying to build. They've been working on that town for a long time, and it's not it's not happening. But in your town, the white town is just being built, and it's happening fast. What's wrong with the blacks that they tend to only know how to destroy and not build?
It's something they never really learned in their civilizational history. Like in
Well, they
Europe, if
knew
you
how to
didn't get
do
a
it. They knew how to do it before the and down. They knew how to build before the so-called civil rights movement. Why did they
Right.
lose that talent?
Well, I mean, they learned skills. It's about how many tradespeople you have. It's about what skills you have in your community. And they had those skills in the past, partly because they inherited them from the European style civilization they were a part of. And they had to learn those skills. Now, in the modern day, there's welfare and there's a lot of fake jobs and easy ways out. People can avoid hard work. And a lot, not just Black people, a lot of white people take those easy ways out and they don't get those skills they need. So, but going deeper in the past, it's just Black people, where they came from, didn't have to build a house to survive. In Europe, if you didn't have shelter, you were going to die. In East Asia, you would die if you didn't build shelter and grow food.
Yeah.
In Africa, there's a lot of food all over the place. It's relatively temperate. It's just a different environment, but it's not something that Black people can't learn. Clearly, they can learn it because they were doing just fine in the 1940s and
Yeah.
1930s here.
Yeah.
Yes, Jewish influence, Israeli influence is a powerful force in our society, but being obsessed and always blaming the outsider
Yeah.
instead of looking at yourself, it's just not productive.
I agree.
It's tempting, though, and a lot of people fall for it.
There are a group of whites that I keep hearing this as I go around town. There are a group of white people who now believe that the Jews are holding them back, and they're blaming the Jews. And I'm trying to tell them, those that I've met, don't do that, because look at what happened to the Blacks when they blamed the whites. They lost their way. They feel like victims and they cannot function well in society. And I try to tell the whites, I don't know if the Jews owned everything or taken over, but what happened that happened? Why don't you build your own stuff and do it? Nobody can hold you back if you don't allow that or believe that. But there are whites who are blaming the Jews. Can you tell them to wake up and stop that before they end up like the Blacks?
Well, yeah, they better. It's one thing to be truthful about historical facts. So if it is the case that the Jewish community in America helped to lead to the Civil Rights Act, people should know about that history so that we're aware. But if you're playing a chess game and your opponent is too clever for you, you can't just blame your opponent. You got to come up with a better strategy.
Right. Oh, what a mess. And so, are you a Christian?
Yeah, I am a Christian.
And what does it mean to be a Christian for you?
To follow Jesus, to have faith in Jesus. I mean, most fundamentally, I believe in his moral message. I also believe in his saving power as a incarnation of God. So, although I think even just the moral message, if you follow the commandments that Jesus gave, like forgiving others how you would want to be forgiven, treating them how you want to be treated, like that's really sufficient to lead a very good life.
Do you love the Blacks?
Of course. Yeah, I love all peoples.
You love the
but
Jews?
Because I love the Jews too.
So you love all people?
Yeah,
right.
But to love someone is to want them to benefit. And sometimes, there are unhealthy relationships between these groups. We shouldn't be blaming Jews. Jews shouldn't be trying to control our societies. We shouldn't be keeping Blacks down. Blacks shouldn't be blaming us as victimizers. Because I love those other groups, I think they should have their own communities and look after their own well-being, so that we all get along.
So, Eric, do you believe racism exists?
I do believe some people are genuinely racists in that they hate other groups of people. That's how I define racism. Hatred of other groups, wishing harm on other groups. We have racialist type of views. We think there are real racial differences. We think that society works better when it's racially coherent and homogeneous, I should say. But unfortunately, there are real racists out there. Most of them aren't white. There are a lot of Black racists. I think there are a lot of racists in the other races as well.
I know that racism does not exist, and you said what it is. It is hatred, not racism. God said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and wickedness. And so human heart, until they return to God, are evil. And people hate one another until they return to God. Then they love when they truly return to God. And so I just say it's evil. It's either good or evil, and it has nothing to do with racism. That word was just made up so that they can control the people with that word, and they've been using that word forever. And people have only gotten worse, but instead of better. But if you call it what it is, it's hatred. It's evil to hate your fellow man, to try to hurt your fellow man. And I believe if the people understood that it was evil, they can overcome that. But if you think that is racism, which doesn't exist, how can you overcome something that doesn't exist? You know what I mean?
And they keep changing the definition and
Yeah.
tweaking it, where the way it's defined in critical race theory, only white people can be racist. A black person can't be racist. So it's just this kind of incoherent nonsense that, it changes every year. You got to get the updates and get your new version of racial ideology. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's hatred
Yeah.
deep down. And if you just confront that and say, this will not be tolerated, we're not going to tolerate hatred of other groups,
Yeah.
well, then you can allow people to have love of their own groups. And that's the problem, is that loving your own group for white people is now labeled as hatred and racism.
Amazing. So we have about 2 to 3 minutes left here. Were women created to lead or follow?
I think they're created to follow. I think that's their nature.
Yeah. Would you ever follow a woman?
I mean, if she was like making a meal and I was trying to help out and grab the flour or whatever, in that circumstance, sure.
I noticed that men seem to be okay with following women. And now that the men have accepted this, you have women in everything, in government, mayors and police chief and everything, and the country is falling apart as a result of changing God's order, because women were created to follow, men were created to lead, and whenever you put a woman in a position of leadership, everything falls apart. Have you noticed that in this country?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Throughout my life, too. In school, I mean, you have all female leaders in the classroom,
Yeah.
and that's what we're conditioned for. And the way that women lead, when they try to lead, so-called, is different from the way that men lead. Women are concerned about care and not harming each other. Men are concerned about virtue and excellence in doing what's right.
Yeah.
Right. So women don't demand the best of men. All they're going to do is keep them from roughhousing, keep them from expressing their natural masculine urges.
Yeah.
And that's led to a castrated generation of weak, cowardly men.
What a mess. Eric, give out your website again, or whatever information you want to give out.
Sure, yeah, returntotheland.org. You can fill out a questionnaire, take an interview, and then join the PMA, have access to our chats, and link up with like-minded folks. You can find me on X at Arvoll, AARVOLL_. And yeah, it was great speaking with you, Jesse.
You too. I really wish you guys well in what you're doing. It's really nice to finally see white people standing up, especially white men, standing up for what they believe and doing what they want to do in their own country. And it's about time.
You're right about that.
I wish you well, man. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thank you. Take care, Jesse.
All right. You too, buddy. Amazing. Isn't it amazing to see white people standing up for a change? I haven't seen this since growing up in Alabama under the Jim Crow law. So I wish them well. It's their country after all.